Good morning, good afternoon, and maybe good evening, wherever you are in the world right now. And welcome to episode 33 of International Expansion Explained. My guest today is Tia Ellis, who is a global expert in US retail strategy, empowering international CPG brands to break into the US retail market. And as the CEO of Wildflower Insight, which is a certified minority and women owned business, she's helped brands land over $100 million in retail sales. Tia is also a sought after speaker at international conferences who brings game changing insights in retail strategy, buyer engagement, and pitch development, equipping brands with the strategies and confidence to secure the purchase orders and achieve sustainable growth in the US retail market. Tia, welcome and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
and and thank you to everybody who's actually listening to this live. Maybe somebody could just drop us a hi in the chat so that we know that we are not simply talking to ourselves. The technical side says we are live, but I always like to just be sure. Yeah. And Tia, I know you've been extremely busy in the last couple of weeks with trade shows in the US, but also internationally. And I think that you, like me, get completely, I can see when we're talking that you light up at this kind of all this kind of craziness that there is about that. So what was it initially that led you to get into international trade, and especially for foreign food and beverage? Because it's not the thing that people, if you ask some 5-year-old Tia, she's not going to say, oh, I want to be a international food and drinks my expert when I grow up, is she?
Right, yeah, and you're exactly right. I over the last few weeks, it's a kind of the busy season. It's conference after conference from Dubai to Barcelona to even in California, and it really, when people ask me why I'm in this industry, it really boils down to the simple fact of that it's just so exciting and it's so much fun to support new and up and coming and emerging brands. I absolutely love this industry, and I've always, I guess, been passionate about international business. I think that my journey started when I, first saw that it's really difficult for global brands to break into the US market. As a second generation immigrant, I've kind of always seen how challenging it is to navigate some of the unfamiliar business landscapes. And over the last few years, 10 years almost, I've worked with various CPG companies and helping them grow into multi-million-dollar accounts across retailers. It kind of became this thing where, well, Tia can help you. She's the CPG girl, or Tia knows how to do this because she's did this one thing before. And very, very quickly it became this space of, well, I'm not exactly sure what the precise roadmap is going to look like, but I'm more than happy to help and willing to share education and knowledge. And so over the last, I would say probably 4 years, I've really, really honed in on this segment of working with international CPG brands to help them succeed in the US. And just based off of a personal experience, I have found that there's very few resources for international CPG brands to be successful stateside. And I will never say that it's easy to do business in the US. It is absolutely not. But for somebody that lives stateside, speaks English as the native language, it's difficult, but there are resources that you can find and lean on to find success. For international brands and founders that may or may not have not only a time zone difference, language barriers, cultural or social norms that are just different on how people operate business, it becomes very, very, very difficult to be set up for success. And so for me, I love working in the international space because you really get to impact people and change lives. And it's not just, it's not just another business transaction. It's quite literally changing people's lives and impacting people in really, really powerful ways, which for me is really my passion. I love helping people, and I love sharing knowledge and education.
Yeah, and I think that when you're based in a market and you're very, very deeply into the details and the specifics of one particular market, you tend to forget because you take those things for granted, don't you? That's just the norm. And then when you're talking to other brands who are just entering into the market for the first time, you really see that some of those little small things, not necessarily even your biggest tips, but just the things that you do automatically that are part of your muscle memory,
Yeah.
they prevent another company making some huge mistakes right at the start of their international journeys, maybe.
Right. And it, I've seen it happen over and over again, that these mistakes are actually very, very common. It used to be, I would hear people say, man, I just wish there was somebody that could understand, or I wish there was somebody that could get what I'm going through. And if some of the founders would just get together and even have, a virtual happy hour, they would see that they're all going through very, very similar things. And it's not exclusive to one person or one brand or one country or one product even.
Yeah.
It's the same difficulties over and over again. And, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but just from a personal experience and even being in my personal social circle, being an entrepreneur is wildly isolating. And if you don't have the resources and people to lean on and just, collaborate with, it can be really, really difficult to move forward and to continue to have the motivation to, forge that path when you feel like you're doing it alone.
Yeah. No, that's so true. And would you say that if you when I mean you're somebody who's very deeply in the US market, which is a market that I don't know well at all, but what would you describe as the biggest trends at the moment in food and beverage retail? When you go through all of these trade shows and you're looking at brands that are doing well in the US, what are the things that are kind of the big themes right now?
Yeah. So right now, and it changes every couple of years. Right now, healthy prebiotic soda is, of course, top two, top three type of product innovation. Everybody wants it. Everybody wants to compete with Poppy and Olipop. And I just at my last expo that I was at Natural Products Expo West in Anaheim, I saw at least 15 different, new and emerging prebiotic sodas with different flavors and different, sparkling contents. I mean, you so much prebiotic soda, you don't even ever want to see it again. But a little bit, something that's just a little bit more general. We're seeing a lot of data that the consumers stateside are looking for healthy and a lot plant-based. So we're also, I feel that we're transitioning a little bit away from typically the traditional meat and looking for plant-based alternatives that are more sustainable. There's a lot of things that I'm seeing from seaweed and proteins and soy and just
Okay.
stuff that's really, really innovative. I saw a really fantastic company that was doing a vegan caviar. And I can't tell you what the product that they're using is because I don't want to spoil their secrets. But I tried it and it was wonderful, and it had absolutely nothing to do with fish at all. It was coming from the ocean in different ways, and it was wonderful. And we're seeing, based off the data, that the U.S. consumer is looking for not only innovative products, they want new flavors, they want to be adventurous with their flavor profiles, but they also want to be able to purchase something that they feel good about. And right now, the story that's selling stateside is plant-based, sustainable, good for the environment, non-harming to animals. And of course, there's always going to be things that have milk and meats and things and stuff like that. But the really hot pieces right now that I'm seeing over the last 3 expos that I've gone to really are focusing in on the sustainable packaging, functional ingredients, and plant-based alternatives.
Yeah, that's that's kind of what I would have expected, at least the plant-based alternatives, but it's always good to hear it confirmed because you're never sure quite when those kind of trends are going to start to maybe slow down or tail off a little bit. And move
Well,
into?
they go back and forth too. So
Yeah.
it's like one year you've got the plant-based thing, and then next year it's, everybody wants the really high quality butter to go in their coffee because now the carnivore trend is trending, and that's totally fine, but it really does. And we're seeing now with the influence of social media and these huge tech platforms that these trends are changing faster than they ever had. It used to be that, you would have a trend once a year, maybe at once every 2 or 3 years, but it would pretty much stay straight on whatever that trend was. And now with, the TikTok influencers and Instagram and people that are influencing others online, these trends are changing as quickly as 1 week. And so that's becoming actually a really challenging space for merchants and US buyers to navigate, because now they see, okay, well, for example, there was a trend almost 2 years ago, and it was pickled garlic. So it was like a jar of garlic. You would put sriracha sauce in it, and I think thyme, like the herbs thyme, and you would shake it up, and then you would just with your fork grab the garlic, eat it with the spicy sauce and the herb. And it went wildly viral. You couldn't find pickled garlic anywhere in any stores. It was crazy. I actually tried it. It was like exactly how you would imagine, spicy pickled garlic. It wasn't like anything that it wasn't this like innovative thing that just was incredibly mind blowing, that just, man, like revolutionary. It literally tasted like spicy pickled garlic, but it went viral. So everybody wanted to try it. And so the challenge for the US merchant is that they now have to make decisions based off of the trends, but then they also have to decide and be a little bit cautious. Is this going to be something that only lasts for 2 weeks or maybe 3 months? Or is this going to be something that really is going to change the category and is going to be here to last? Because it depends on the volume that they're going to bring in based off of the trends or what they're predicting the trends to last. So it becomes this really challenging space. And so we're seeing that there are really 2 ways that the US merchants typically are responding. They're either jumping all in and super excited about the trends, and they want to be the early adapters and fight for that shelf space so that they can have the retailer that is providing the trendy item. Or they are really late adapters. They don't want really anything to do with it, and they are slow to the game and miss the boat typically. And there's very few that are like, I'll take the chance and take the trendy item now, and then maybe sometimes we're not going to do it. They're either all in or basically all out. And so it's also, as a brand, how you navigate that, especially if you do have that trendy or innovative or up and coming, item that is, on social media. How do you pitch that to the buyer? How do you know what the buyer's response is going to be, and communicating that in a way where it's not just going to be something that's very transactional and short-lived?
Yeah, and I think that the challenge for lots of smaller brands is that simply, if you have that kind of TikTok overnight viral sensation, how do you actually even manage to supply that? Because if you're coming from a very small supplier, you're not equipped to deliver nationwide and to be that reliable on keeping the supply chain filled on products, because that's virtually impossible to be able to be doing, isn't it? From a standing start almost.
Yeah. And and even what you just touched on is, some of the personal products that you see TikTokers or influencers promoting, and those are their own branded items. Of course, they need to figure out manufacturing and do it in a way where they can support large orders. But going a little bit into the retail side, one of the things that we see so often is that brands want a national rollout with a national account. I get almost every single day, hey, I want a national rollout with the largest retailer in the world. Can you get me into 5,000 store locations? Well, one, if you have a national rollout with a retailer that has almost 5,000 store locations, the likelihood that you're able to support that, unless you're doing wild volume in your home country, is slim. You're going to have to be able to support, just a ballpark number would be 100,000 units. and you need to be able to have that ready in 4 weeks. So can the brand support that from a manufacturing perspective? Like can the manufacturing facility even create 100,000 units within 4 weeks that can be ready to ship? Can the founder or the board of directors or whoever's managing the finance for the brand, can they support that from a financial perspective? How are you going to pay for that product? And then once it gets here, how are you gonna support it? Like what's your logistics plan? Do you have a warehouse stateside? Are you sending it directly to a distribution partner? Do you get to sell it directly to the retailer? And there's so many nuanced pieces of it that a lot of founders, not exclusive to the international market, just in general, a lot of founders don't really think. They think, I have the product, people like it, make the big sales. And there's so many more pieces that go into that to make sure that the founder will be set up for success. And at the end of the day, when everything else is clear, that there's going to be a little bit of money left over for the business. And that's a huge problem that we see, is that companies will think, well, the US is such a lucrative market because it is. It's the largest consumer product user. It's the largest CPG purchasers in the world. We have such a high demand for people that like to spend money, which is just kind of what it is. But we also have people that can be like a little bit hesitant when it comes to purchasing the products. And so founders think, I want to enter the US market because we know that there's a lot of people that like to spend money there. Absolutely true. But you've got to be able to set yourself up in a way where you're going to be set up for success in the long term. And it's not a short-term game. It's a long-term game.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of smaller companies and founders, they should know better from doing business. If we're talking international companies, they should know better from their own markets.
Yeah.
But they also tend to believe that the listing is the hardest part of the process, and not realizing that, realistically speaking, the listing is just one part of the process. And you might have that national rollout, but then your product's on the shelf and you still have to get the consumer to actually realize it's on the shelf and take it off the shelf and spend their money on it when they have other choices, usually in most categories already.
Totally.
It's not just a simple, hurrah, we're listed in whoever.
Yep.
Now we're going to be rich. There's a lot more to it than that. Even if you've got all of the ducks in a row regarding the supply chain, you still haven't got the consumer on board necessarily.
The hardest part about selling in the US and working with US merchants and US based retailers is not getting the foot in the door. It's not closing the pitch. I mean, none of those things are easy, but it doesn't even come close to how difficult it is to actually getting your products off the shelf to convince the consumer to purchase it. And a lot of times we see international founders think that it's actually on the retailer to make the sales for them and to market the product for them. And it might be, in home countries, but in the US, it absolutely is not the retailer's job to sell your products. They will send a purchase order to you. They will take the product and send you the money. But at the end of the day, if you as the founder or, the marketing team or whoever's in charge of, promotional activities cannot convince the consumer from an education standpoint or maybe even a trial standpoint, the product will sit on the shelf and it will never go anywhere. And that's where we see founders get into really, really dangerous water, because if product sits on shelf, then they're not making money. The retailer's not selling it, but then it becomes this danger zone of expiring, and the retailer is not going to hold that bag at the end of the day. They're going to make the founders pay for that. So if the product doesn't sell and it sits on the shelf and it expires, the retailers will charge back to the founder because, hey, we took a shot on you and we didn't make any money, so give us the money back.
Yeah.
And so it really is super important that when you are planning your US market expansion, or maybe even taking on your first retail account stateside, to make sure that you have a strong marketing budget to focus on driving trial in stores, whether that's sampling programs or it is coupons and doing promos like buy one, get one, driving trial, but also trying to do coupons that drive volume, not necessarily ones that are here's 20% off. So I hope that you enjoy, your 20% off discount, but maybe buy two and you get one. So then at the cash register, you're actually getting a 3-unit spend versus just one. And so when you're able to show to your merchant or your buyer that's taken a chance on you that, hey, look, we are driving volume, people are doing this, we just need to continue to increase this. That's the big win. In making sure that you're managing that relationship with the merchant, keeping them in the loop, asking for ways that you can support them or other additional marketing ideas. Merchants like that. They like people that are coachable and will continue to work on things with you. They want a partner. Merchants and buyers never want a transactional vendor or supplier.
Yeah. And they want somebody who's going to invest into their promotional programs and support the brand and show that they really believe in it themselves and put their money where their mouth is, don't they? They want the brand owner to have skin in the game as well. It's not just a now it's your turn kind of scenario. Yeah. But let's take a step back a minute and look at if an international brand is looking to get into the US market, what is their typical kind of route to market and what kind of things should they be looking at? I mean, Drew asked the question about marketing and packaging and cultural gaps and all of those kind of things, but for me, that's only part of the story because often let's say you have to start with the basic building blocks, don't you, can I actually sell this product that I have from a regulatory perspective in the US, or does it have ingredients or something inside it that isn't compatible with FDA regulations?
Yeah, so, unlike a lot of other markets, the US doesn't have a single regulatory body that oversees food imports. If we're talking specifically about foods, it's actually a mix of FDA and USDA, sometimes state regulations, and then even sometimes specific retailer standards. Some of the common pitfalls that we see include like incorrect labeling. So not even meeting the FDA requirements, maybe not registering as a US agent, which actually is required for foreign brands. Sometimes it's misunderstanding the ingredient restrictions because the ingredient instructions and regulations are completely different on what you need to have for the US market. And then sometimes brands will overlook state level regulations. So we have 50 states stateside, and it's important to make sure that you understand if there are laws or regulations. And we see this a lot with products that are in the hemp space. There are countries that hemp-based products are totally fine. There are even states that hemp-based products are totally fine, but there are some that really, it's not allowed at all. And so if you try to bring it in, not only just bringing it in stateside, like entering the port at a state that doesn't allow it, but then you try to sell it to a distribution facility that supports one of those states, it becomes a really, really big nightmare for brands to kind of try to backtrack and get product back. So, those regulations are probably the biggest ones: FDA, USDA, state regulations, and then specific to the retailers, depending on which retailer you're working with. But going to your question almost on that distribution side of it, the US is a fragmented market. And so one of the hardest things with distribution is that there is not really a centralized grocery system. There are a lot of different retailers, and they all own their own systems. There are also distribution companies, like very large distributors that support those retailers. And one of the most challenging things, and really this is the most common complaint we get, is it's a chicken versus an egg scenario. I was talking with somebody on LinkedIn just the other day on this, and the retailers want to know, well, who are your distribution partners? Like, where can I buy this product from? And then the distribution people want to know, well, where are you selling? Because the distributors don't want to take on your product unless you already have a, how do they call it? They call it like a keystone or a capstone account that really is going to drive volume, because nobody wants to take it in, right? Nobody wants to get stuck holding the hot potato at the end of the song. And so it's always a chicken and egg. The retailer doesn't want to take it unless they can easily buy it from the distributor, and the distributor will not take it unless they have a retailer commitment. And so these two bodies, they just don't talk. And so it becomes very, very difficult. And one of the ways that I found that founders can kind of get around that is at the beginning, working with retailers that don't require a distribution partner. So if you're able to go to a retailer directly, it makes the conversation a lot easier, and just send your product to the distribution center that the retailer owns instead of going through a large distributor. For me and for the founders that I've worked with, that has basically cut out the middleman, alleviated a lot of the headache, and made it a lot easier for the founders to become successful stateside at the beginning. And then, of course, once you have your hot potato reference, once you have your first retail account, it then becomes this piece of, well, these other retailers see that your first account has it and they don't want to get left behind. And then all of a sudden it's like this high school game of not wanting to be left out and wanting to be included in the fun. And so it snowballs, it does. It snowballs very quickly once you get that first retail account. But if you're going back and forth on this chicken and egg thing, skip one of them and go directly to a retailer. So focus on retail accounts that allow you to go directly to their distribution centers, build that account, use it as a success story, and then include that in all of your marketing and pitch decks as you go and present to other retailers as well. And then that's how you can just, skyrocket with volume and distribution.
And that's interesting because in a lot of the countries that I've worked with, which has been, let's say, Europe, Eastern Europe, Asian markets, also in Africa, a lot of the time, if you go to a distributor, you expect that the distributor has that relationship with retail. And that's one of the reasons that you go to a distributor as a small or medium-sized company, because they will do that heavy lifting for you with that initial listing. And in most cases, most brands, even within Europe, a lot of brands are not delivering directly into retail outside of their home market, simply because the logistics of it are too complicated to be able to deliver into stores on a daily basis, or to manage all of those kind of logistic processes that are in there. So it's an interesting comparison, which was one of the reasons that I wanted to have you explain that a little bit, because I think that that's an important point for people who are looking to enter.
And distributor, that we have this term stateside that I believe is exclusive to the US retail market. I haven't heard it used anywhere else in any other country, but we have this term called broker. And a broker is somebody that basically owns a relationship with a retailer. It could be any specific retailer, or it could be a specific category. But what the brokers do is they say, hey, I've got a relationship with retailer X, and I know you want to get into retailer X. So what I'll do is I'll charge you a retainer fee anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 US per month to, see if we can get you a conversation or an introduction, or, potentially a buyer meeting. And what happens a lot of the time, now there are really wonderful brokers. I know quite a few brokers that are fantastic, but what also unfortunately happens is sometimes there are brokers that kind of just take advantage of brands. And that's not exclusive to international brands. That's even brands that are stateside that just don't understand the expectations, what the broker's job really should be, or have difficulty communicating what they specifically need. And so they a lot of times brokers don't work out. Again, sometimes they do. There are wonderful brokers that I personally know and have used. But just like with anything, there's always, the bad apples in the group. In the US, we also have the term distributor, and distributors, that word is used really in two big ways. So the first one is on the international market. So internationally, when you use the word distributor, it basically is somebody that says, hey, just like you've said, they kind of own the relationship. Like if you have a distributor in Europe, they own the relationship with, maybe 10 or 15 retailers, and it's kind of on them to sell your product into those retailers. That's the whole point of working with them. They get either a commission or they get a flat, pennies on the dollar, whatever it is, but they get paid based off what they sell. So they're motivated to sell. We have those kind of distributors stateside, but a lot of times what happens is, and I just recently saw this at the Gulf Foods conference. There were a lot of Asian brands. It was in Dubai, and so there were a lot of really innovative Asian products from Japan and different areas in India, and really wonderful products. But when I went out to speak with some of these founders, they were really confused on the distributor, the word. And so the word distributor, when you're talking about international markets and you're speaking to international brands, a lot of the times that word means somebody that says, hey, again, I've got that relationship, just like in Europe, I've got a relationship with 10 or 15 retailers. And what I'll do is I will actually purchase the product for you. I will send the PO, and then it's on me to sell the product to my existing retailers. And so what was happening specific at this conference is the people that I was talking to said, hey, I would ask the question, are you sold in the US? And they would say, yeah, absolutely. And I would say, where? And they said, New York. And I said, okay, and where else? Miami. Okay, what retailers are you in? Like, what store can I shop in to buy your product? And they're like, I don't even know. I was like, how do you not know where your product is being sold? And they said, well, the distributor I'm working with sells into the ethnic grocery stores or the Asian stores, or sometimes every once in a while you would hear like a TJ Maxx, or like stores that have a whole bunch of really cool products that are just kind of all over the place. And I love TJ Maxx. I shop at TJ Maxx. There's nothing against TJ Maxx. But these founders really, like, they had absolutely no idea where their products were being sold because a distributor was handling it. And here's the really, really dangerous part in working with distributors in this way. I would then ask the founder, okay, well, if you're looking for more distribution stateside, there are these other people that might be able to help you. And they said, absolutely not. We actually already signed an exclusivity agreement with this distributor. So not only can they no longer work with other distributors or other brokers or other people that are going to go out and sell the product for them, they're stuck to wherever that one distributor is sending their products. And so what happens is almost every single one that I talked with, again, at the Gulf Foods show, these founders are stuck with selling their products in the US, not knowing which locations they're actually in, which specific retail stores they're in. But then they also are getting stuck in the distribution channels for the Asian grocery stores or the ethnic stores, or some other grocery stores, and they're not hitting mainstream. And so the only way for them now, because they've signed this exclusivity clause, they're working with this distributor that they thought was going to be great, but they are good because they are selling the products, the founder's getting money, they are happy, but they've basically capped their growth and their income potential, that is the dangerous game, especially if you're looking for the US sales and you want to hit the mainstream market. That's what everybody wants to do. They want to have their products available, but if you cap yourself, then you're stuck. The other piece, so that's the first part of what a distributor could be. There's another piece for distributors. So we have these very, very large distributors stateside, and I'm not going to say their names, but if you Google largest distributors for food and beverage products in the US, the 2 or 3 of them will pop up. You can find them. They're very, very easy. But the way that they work is it's that chicken and egg thing. So they only want to take on products if you have a retail commitment. So they're not going to take in any new product just because they don't want to get stuck with it. And they do very, very, very little selling and promotion for other retailers. Now, they have relationships with almost every retailer mainstream in the US, but that's not their job. And it's really confusing, actually, because they actually have account managers to handle internally each retail relationship. So the distributor person has a relationship with a retail representative to make sure that their products are getting there on time and that their distribution centers are communicating and that product gets delivered. But they do very, very, very little selling for the brands. And so it becomes this really, really challenging conversation to navigate when you have this word broker that doesn't exist anywhere except for the US. Then you have the traditional distributor everywhere else in the world, and they operate in this way. And then you also have this other little player of a distributor that's kind of almost exclusive again to the US market in the way that it operates. And so it's really challenging to navigate. 1, which one you're talking to, 2, which one is the best one for your brand, and 3, how can you make the most sales with the least amount of money, which at the end of the day is what all founders really want to know. What's going to be the greatest impact with the least amount of finances and resources to spend.
Yeah, it's not an easy path to navigate, I think, for any of them at all.
Definitely.
And how about with the localization piece? I mean, often the US is seen as a market, at least from Europe, the US is seen as a market where it's pretty difficult to get into, but I don't think that a lot of European companies see it necessarily as a market where they need to do a strong localization other than matching their packaging to the regulations, the wording on the packaging.
Yep.
How important is it for them to really look at their flavors, look at things like, I don't know, sugar, salt,
Yep.
all those kinds of nuances of a recipe that you can tweak without actually changing the complete essence of a recipe, or even things like brand message? How do the brands that you're working with typically have to localize their products to be successful?
Well, it's critical. The U.S. is not one single market. It is a collection of regional preferences. And so what works in, for example, New York might not work in Texas. And successful brands that we've seen tweak their flavor profiles and packaging and messaging to align with the U.S. consumer expectations. For example, adjusting sugar spice, just like you said, adjusting sugar or spice levels based off of local taste preferences is going to be really, really important. Now, unless you have a national brand and you're selling a cookie, something simple, you're selling your special cookies, you probably aren't going to change the spice levels or the sugar levels. It's probably going to be pretty consistent. But if you have something that is innovative, or you're targeting a specific demographic, you are going to need to adjust those flavor profiles based off of the pockets and the regions of which your target consumer is living. You need to know and understand how important, one, the demographics are for your brand, but two, the location of where those demographics are living, so that you can have the most impact, whether it's online on social media targeting ads, or it's working with retailers that are specific to that region. The other thing that's super, super important is, for me, it seems like something that's so simple, but for some, it's not. English first packaging needs to be clear and concise. Most U.S. consumers speak English as their first language. And a lot of times we have multiple languages that people speak as well, but English has to be the number one language on the packaging. It's super, super important. And then highlighting on the packaging, highlighting key attributes like clean labels or organic, or one thing that is really great to be able to add if you qualify for it is women owned, or something that can show, hey, we're more than just the product, we are the story. And I think that goes back to part of the first conversation that we were having on the buyers and the merchants want to be able to invest in products and brands that have a story, because the story is what's going to sell off the shelf. And the consumer, again, is looking for that sustainable piece. They want the compelling brand story. They want to understand, if the product is doing good in the world somewhere, because they want to feel good about what they're purchasing. The US consumer, just like any consumer globally, probably is wildly overwhelmed and oversaturated with marketing ads and things that they can buy. So when they do purchase something, especially if they're going to try something new and go on trial, they want to make sure that it's something that either is going to be good for them, or it's going to make them feel good in some way. And a lot of times that feel good piece is the history, the story, the social impact that your brand is doing outside of just drinking the water or whatever it is.
And I think that, like you say, most categories are so oversaturated anyway that you have to have something that's going to make you stand out as a brand, and it's got to be something that you can talk about for more than 5 minutes. It's not enough to have something that you just mention on one social media post and then you've already told the full story, is it? You have to have something that goes deeper than that, and which is a more nuanced broader reach to it, what that actually means. What are clean labels? What does women owned actually mean in terms of your brand, and how that applies, and how that affects your workforce and the area that you come from and the heritage and all of those kind of topics that I think can be so fascinating and that really can make the essence of a brand. But lots of people are just like, you know, we're a spaghetti company. We come from Italy. That's enough. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, it's not enough.
Yeah. Yeah. You're so right.
Mm.
It's no longer enough to be the best blank company. So if we were to talk about the spaghetti company from Italy, the consumers don't care anymore. There are so many spaghetti companies. There are so many, and unless you have something that is absolutely like you are the first in the world to ever do this, the consumers don't care anymore. So they really like, I cannot emphasize how important the story is and the impact is, because that's what's going to make you stand off the shelf and make you different, and really be the piece that's going to give you the opportunity to convince a consumer to purchase.
Yeah. And how about things like environmental considerations? I mean, this is something that I know, for example, from Asia, that um, a lot of European companies, they have this kind of very environmentally friendly cardboard packaging, and you put it in some kind of traditional trade in Indonesia, the Philippines, or in Hong Kong during the rainy season, and with, if the shop itself doesn't actually have the AC running, then within about 10 minutes, the packaging is all warped because the humidity is too much, or, or you struggle when you send a truck to Kazakhstan in winter and the stuff gets frozen en route. Those kind of topics. Is that something that is a consideration for the States? Or is that something that, as a nation, the supply chains and the retail structures are so developed that it's not really an issue anywhere?
We have such mature infrastructure stateside that if you are concerned, let's use ice cream as an example. Obviously, it needs to be really, really cold in the truck 100% of the time, otherwise it's ruined. It really isn't a problem. The only thing that I would say on the environmental considerations, we'll go back to the ice cream thing. If you have something that needs to be cold and you're worried about taking it to a hot state, like for example, Texas in the summer can get up to 40 degrees Celsius. It's very, very hot. And it's, if you have a cold product, it's kind of dangerous. However, because the infrastructure is so strong and the technology is so strong, not only from the distribution centers, but also from the logistics side, there are trucks that will keep the product cold. Like we have frozen trucks. So it really, that's not so much of a concern in the shipping and the logistics piece. However, one thing that I'll say on that environmental consideration is that the environment will also influence the type of products that you sell. So it goes back to who is going to be your target consumer, who are like specifically like who exactly is going to purchase your product, who they are, that's the customer profile, and then where is that person shopping. So for example, I'll give you a really good example on this. Hawaii and California are, my understanding, some of the strongest consumers of coconut water in the United States. There's also a really hot pocket in Florida, a couple of pockets in the Northeast, but then again in Texas. The majority of them, though, are in the really warm, tropical, humid climates. And so if you are considering selling something that's a tropical beverage that's great for hydration, knowing that the retailers that are supporting Hawaii, California, Texas, Florida, that's going to be a huge consideration when you are trying to enter the US market, because it's not only going to tell you that that's where the consumer is, that's what the consumer is consuming, but also that's where the consumer is shopping. And so it makes your strategy and your plan for the retail expansion and your target retailers a lot more clear based off of where the consumer is, where your target consumer is. And that's exclusive to your brand and your company and your product. But that's part of the research that you really have to do before you just jump in and say, I'll take any money from any company. I'll take any purchase order. I'll be so happy with it. you don't want to do that. Like, you really want to make sure that if it's not the right retailer, you say no to them. And that's another thing that founders, sometimes get shy about, is they don't want to say no to a retailer. But if it's not the right retail partner for you, and it's going to drive down the value of your brand, or it's in a region that's not even relevant to where your consumer is shopping, it's probably not the right retail partner. And actually, it can really hurt your brand if you take on a retailer and you don't drive sales because your consumer is not there. They're not even shopping there, but you were excited about getting a purchase order to say that you were in the US, but it's not valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's something that brands who are going international underestimate, that
Yeah.
idea that really you only get one chance to make a really good first impression. And you can have, let's say, when you go into a market for the first time, maybe you start at zero, metaphorically speaking. But if you go into a market and you make a complete bodge of the market entry, then realistically speaking, your brand equity is in a kind of negative state. You're at less than the point that you started with, because rather than just having no idea about who you are and what you do, people now have that negative idea that, well, I heard from my friend in, I don't know, in Arkansas somewhere that, that your product just didn't sell at all, or that retail had to throw stuff away and then they had a big battle with you to get their money back because stuff expired on the shelf, and all of those kind of topics. And you just can do without it as a brand, can't you? It's just easier to have a strategic plan and do things properly in the first place, rather than
Couldn't agree more. Yes, you definitely need a strategy and a plan. That's one of the, again, most common things that we see is founders come in and they think, I'll just take anything. And there really should be a good strategy, a good plan for a founder that's trying to enter the US market. You should probably have between 5 and 10 very specific retail accounts that you are targeting, like you are actively reaching out to. You're trying to find the buyer, you're sending products, you're doing sampling, like you are giving everything you have for those 10 retailers. And hopefully one of them will take you. That's the goal. You don't want to ever send all of your products out, apply to every single portal. And you can spend all of your time doing that and applying to portals, but you'll end up wasting a lot of time.
Yeah. And it's expensive at the end of the day as well. It's money that you could be using to focus on somebody who's more likely to be a good client for you.
Yeah, and it's time also. The value of your time is so important. If you're spending, 2 weeks nonstop, 40, 80 hours total of just applying to portals and you're not getting anything back, that's 80 hours of time that you could be spending, doing product development or building existing accounts or, building out marketing programs and strategies. I think that sometimes founders don't understand. It seems that everybody understands the value of money. Nobody really has a problem with that. People understand, well, that costs this much. Maybe I don't want to do that. But when it comes to their time, it becomes this thing of, well, I'll just do it. Like, I'll just take care of it. I'll spend 2 hours on it. And here's another 4 hours. And I'll just do this on the weekend. And it becomes this really push and pull of, the value of your time is, I think, more valuable and more important than the value of the finances and of the money, because you can always make more money. You can never get back more time. And so if you can figure out a way to outsource or advocate for yourself, or, only spend your time doing the things that really, really need you, and delegate other jobs. That's how you build, and that's how you build empires. Or at least that's what they tell
me. Yeah, that's what they tell me too. Delegation is easier said than done though sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah. Do you have maybe you've got a case study that you can tell us where we could, let's say, really pull some learnings out of it, of a brand who's entered the US successfully in this space, and what things they did really well that helped them to have a very effective launch?
Yes, I'll give you a case study. I'm not going to mention the brand name, but I'll give you a case study, a good thing and a bad thing that happened with them. There is a company that I work with, and they When we started working, they were in one retailer stateside, and they spent all of their money, probably close to 60, maybe 70% on marketing. So marketing in stores, driving trial, basically doing sampling programs, quite literally pouring stuff into little sample cups so people could taste and try their product. They grew, the first 2 years, they went from 2 SKUs. The next 2 years, because review cycles for retailers are anywhere between 1 and 2 years, they'll review the category and then you get an opportunity to pitch. The second review cycle, they went from 2 SKUs to 4 SKUs. And then on the third review cycle, they went from 2 to 4 to now 9. And so they built their range because they were able to showcase to the merchants and to the buyers that people were trying the product, people were buying the product, but the customers would have never tried the product or liked or purchased the product unless they had actually spent all of that money. Like, it was close to like 60% of their revenue that they were getting back. They just threw it right back into marketing and sampling. And so with this specific company, they were able to, on this retailer, showcase, okay, over the last 6 years, we've built from 2 to 4 to now 9 SKUs. Look at how good we are. And now we're performing second only to your private label company. And private label is the retail owned brand. So it's not necessarily a brand, it's whatever the retailer has. And so they offer their own version of it, which is phenomenal. It actually, the specific brand is outperforming the industry leader, the $1 billion category leader, at this retailer, because they're driving trial and finding that their customers are really enjoying this version and their brand over the category leader, which is wonderful. And so with that, and so this is the key learning for all of that. There's a couple of key learnings. 1, spend money on marketing and driving trial. But 2, they took all of that information, built that out into their pitch deck and their documents, and used that as a successful case study to then pitch to other retailers. So between that time, over the last 2 years, from when they received the 9 SKU opportunity, they've spent a lot of time making their pitch deck and their documents wonderful to showcase them as a successful brand. And now other retailers have taken them on as well, because they've been able to showcase the story and the growth that's been consistent. Not a one-off thing that just happens one time with a trend. It's something that's happened consistently over 6 years. And now my understanding is that they've increased almost 700% in sales, gone from 1 state to, I believe, 12 states, and are looking to roll out with quite a few large national accounts in the next 2 years. And again, those take a long time to do, and making sure all of the documents and paperwork is done, but they're on track to be a household name in the next 5 years, which is really, really exciting for them. Now, that's all of the good stuff that's happened. During that exact same time, though, this exact same brand worked with one of those large distributors, one of those, US-based ones, and they didn't understand some of the fees. And this is actually something that, it's really unfortunate that happened, because the distributor that they were working with went through all of the paperwork, said, we're going to bring you on to, I think it was 5 distribution locations, the DCs, and then we're going to help you support some of these retail accounts, one of the newer retail accounts. Again, they built the 2 to 4 to 9. They used that as a case study, and then they presented it to the retailers. Well, this new retailer that they presented the case study to said, okay, that's great. We'll go back to the chicken and egg. You need to go through this distributor. So they said, okay, that's fine. We got some money coming in. We'll work with this distributor. The distributor said, that's great, fine and dandy. We're going to take you on to 5 distribution locations, and we'll take maybe 3 truckloads, which is really, really wonderful. It's good volume for a small brand. But then the distributor said, well, actually, we're going to charge you slotting fees. So what it's going to be is basically about $1,000. It wasn't exactly, I'm not going to give the exact number, but it was about $1,000, $1,000 US per SKU per location. So we're talking about 9 SKUs.
Yep.
We're talking about 5, and so it becomes this, almost hundreds of thousands of dollars in chargeback fees that was not accounted for, was not even even in conversation. It just showed up. And so it's sometimes founders think it's the best. I want to work with these large retailers, and I want to work with the distribution, and I want to have, I want my products everywhere. And if you bite off more than you can chew, you really set yourself up for failure. And so it's making sure that, and this is the key learning, when you work with anybody, whether it's directly with a retailer, when it's working with a distribution partner, where it's working with a broker, it doesn't matter. Make sure that you are spending the time to ask the questions on the finances and the hidden fees and the extra things, because for most, between $50,000 and $100,000 of basically chargebacks that's never going to get paid, or invoices that'll never get paid because they use them for, discretionary fees, can flip a founder. It can flip a brand. And you really, really have to tread lightly. And, one of the things is, the US is not easy. The US market is not easy. The retail market is very, very challenging. And there's so much work that has to be done, whether it's doing the research, doing the marketing, doing the product development, doing the outreach, doing the follow-ups, setting time for expos and booths and conferences, managing teams. I mean, there are so many things. And one of the things that I wanted to share just on this call is, Catherine, I think you have a little freebie that you can pull up on the screen. There is a company that I really love. They're called Coconut VA, and they are wonderful in finding virtual assistants that are supportive to founders. And they really do a nice job of being specific to founder needs. They always, whenever I talk with them, they always talk about how they're kind of like the Swiss Army knife of having somebody that can just do a little bit of everything to support you as you grow. And one of my favorite things to refer and to recommend for founders is that you can, again, we go back to that value of time. If you use a virtual assistant to do some of the data, some of the research, trying to understand the regions, the packaging, I mean, all of that kind of stuff, it saves you time. And my partners with Coconut VA have very, very graciously offered this little freebie here. And so what you'll do is you'll just scan on your phone, like click it like how you would click something if you were going to scan a menu at a restaurant. Click it, enter your information, and then we will send you the introduction to this organization, and they will have somebody reach out to you, and you're going to get 40 hours of free work. Like 40 hours of completely, like somebody that will do work for you for 40 hours, which I don't know about you guys.
That's a huge amount of work.
There's not a single person I know that wouldn't like to have 40 hours back. And whether it's something as simple as managing emails or doing research or setting calendar appointments or helping with website design. I mean, there's so many things. I'm actually a great case study of this. I used to spend between 5 and 6 hours doing emails a day, because something would pop in and I would be working on something and I would jump to this, and then something else would come in, and it would just constantly scattered, and I would just always be monitoring my emails. And that's just basically what I would do all day, the entire day of work. Now I spend less than 15 minutes a day on my emails because I have them organized. My virtual assistant will actually organize them from super high priority. It's end of day. It has to get responded to within the next 8 hours. There's an end of week. So like if I finish all of my end of day and I've got a little extra time after doing, whatever it is I'm working on for the day, hit those with end of week. And then there's the to read. So that's like, anything that happens with, somebody accepted the meeting invitation, or somebody accepted this, or, very simple things that's just good for me to be aware of. I love my virtual assistants. I think that they are probably one of the best decisions I made in the last 12 months to do. And I recommend them to anybody. So it's not as expensive as you think. It's very, very affordable. And the first 40 hours are free. And it's totally worth reaching out and signing up. And it's very, very simple. You just put your name and your email, and then I will personally send you an introduction. So I love that one. It has made huge impacts for myself, but then also the founders that we support. That is the one thing that is consistently, everybody comes back and says, that was the best decision. That was the best thing that I did last year. Like, consistently, it happens over and over. So it's a big win, I think.
Okay, well, thank you. That is a very generous offer. Just before we close up, maybe a little bit more detail, what services you offer who should reach out to you if they are looking at entering into the US market this year or maybe next year? Which kind of companies are your ideal clients that you would
Yeah.
love to work with?
Yeah. So, my company, what we do is we help international consumer product good companies or FMCG companies get distribution stateside. But we are not a broker and we are not a distributor, which is so great because we just broke down all of those different types of meanings. What we do is we provide education on how to enter the US market and do it successfully, but by owning the relationship with the retailer. So we provide the education. We've got it takes anywhere between 4 and 8 weeks, depending on how fast you move through our curriculum and our program. But by the end of the program, you should understand who your target retailers are, what kind of documents, information, templates, we even break down the pricing, the margin expectations per retailer. So you have every idea of how much it's going to cost to enter into the US market, all of those little nuances that we talked about, and then how to present and pitch your deck and materials so that it's going to be received really well from the US buyer. And then once that happens, we actually have private cohort buyer meetings where we'll actually bring in a real life US buyer that's currently sitting in a buyer seat and bring them into our private cohort sessions. And that's available to the people that have completed the program so that they get opportunities to start connecting with buyers in a very intimate and private setting so that they're set up for success. One of the things that we see so often, and I know we're at time, but one of the things that we see so often is that these merchants a lot of the times are moving really quickly within their buying roles. And so what happens is you just develop a relationship with a buyer and then they get a promotion. So they leave and now you don't have that relationship anymore. And so when you have an opportunity to connect with a buyer or merchant that's not in your proper category, and then you also connect with your actual category merchant that you actually need to build a relationship, and that person leaves, you can always come back to this person and say, hey, can you just send me another introduction, or hey, can you connect me with whatever? And so it's almost like an insurance. Like you make sure that you have multiple people within the organization that are going to be in your corner and in supporting you so that you can be set up for success just in case something happens, because you never know. Like the buyers are people too, and if they get a promotion or a better job opportunity, they might take it.
Yeah. I mean, certainly within Europe, it's like a carousel where the buyers are going from one category to the next within the
Yeah.
company, or they're going from one company to the next. And
Yeah. And never burn a relationship, because exactly what
yes,
you said could be the same. It could be the same buyer in the same category that goes from one retailer to the next. And you never know where people are going to end up. So always be kind.
yes, always be kind. And I think on that note, we're going to call it a day. So the most important words of the whole session. So thank you so much. It's been really insightful, very interesting discussion, and so much practical advice for anybody who's looking to enter into the US. Yeah, thank you for taking the time. I know you're very busy.
Thank you. No, it's just such a privilege to be able to come on and talk with you. I love sharing, and I appreciate you asking the questions and inviting me on. This is just so wonderful. And you're just such a joy to be around. Every time I talk with you, it's like I'm in a better mood. I just feel like you're sunshine via Zoom.
Ah, that's cool. Thank you. Yeah. In which case, I will also say thank you to all those people who've taken time out of their day to come and listen to us. I know some of you are in the States, some people are in Europe, I see, and I think there's a couple of people who are also even in China, so quite late night for them as well. So thank you very much, and we will see you soon. Episode 34 will be out in a couple of weeks' time. So also another interesting guest lined up.